Welcome, guys. Episode 8 of Tech for 3. Hopefully, we can discuss some tech that'll help find out what tech is for you. My intro is getting better, so we're getting there. We're
I
getting
liked
there.
it.
It's getting there. I work my way around it.
If we were in Facebook Messenger right now, I'd give you a thumbs up.
Very nice.
Hey, the big one when you hold it for a few seconds.
Say hi, Eddie. We have Eddie with us.
Hey, what's up?
And say hi, Brian.
Hi, Eddie.
That was rough. It's not getting any better. So this week, we're trying to get to be as helpful as possible, get some purchasing decisions out there, and because Eddie has his experience with his Pixel 3, and then we'll talk a little bit about the iPhone XR, which just started pre-orders on the 19th, so people are starting to get those. So we'll get an idea of what the differences are with that, the iPhone XR, the XS, and the XS Max. Brian's got some information on that, but basically how we want to start is just to kind of get some questions for Eddie about his experience with the Pixel. You have a Pixel 3 XL.
I do.
And him coming from a Pixel 2 XL and some of the differences. So kind of go through each category, and then at the end kind of get a feel for who this phone's for, if you should upgrade and all of that. So basically, so you already said you're using a Pixel 3 XL. The last year's Pixel 2 XL had some concerns with the display. So how's the display looking this year versus what you saw last year?
Much nicer. There's not really a flaw with it. It's just a really nice, sharp looking display. It's there's like very little like color shifting. There's very little anything really. It's just you can see that they upped the panel game. And from what I understand, the Pixel 3 XL uses Samsung displays. The Pixel 3 uses LG displays, but it looks like it's just like Apple. They're built to spec, so there's really no color shifting or anything. They're just nice. It's a really sharp display. It's probably one of the better looking panels that I've seen on a phone.
I think that seems to be the common denominator because that was a big deal. How are the colors? 'Cause I know they were muted last year. Is that still the same sort of thing this year?
Yeah, you don't have the option to do like the super saturation. Something similar to last year's Pixel 2 XL. At launch, you didn't have any saturation option. It was just normal or boosted. And then the first software update took it and put in the super saturated colors. This year, it's more even. Like you only have like the normal, the natural, the boosted, and you have a new option called adaptive, which is it changes the colors based on what you're looking at. So if you pull up like a colorful picture and you'll see like there'll be a color shift to it, but it doesn't have the super saturation of like a Samsung Note 9 or any of the new Samsung panels. Like it's just a very even, nice display. It's not like super saturated, and you can't currently make it that way.
So a market upgrade from what you were seeing last year, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So there's no blue hue shift.
At the very end, I think at the very furthest point from it, you can barely see it, but you have to be looking for it.
Okay. Because I know that, viewing angles with OLED are a benefit, except by the time you get to that part where you're trying to view it at a goofy angle, the screen's blue. So it's one of those things that's kind of tough. But I like the fact at least that they're addressing issues that consumers had. So directly addressing issues from the last model, minus the phone almost looking identical. So there's that. So how's the battery life been? How long have you had it for at least a little while?
Like 16 days, I think now. This would be like my 16th day.
Okay. Compared to now what this is like and then what it was like prior.
Battery life's great. It's, I end every day with like 30% or so. You don't really I haven't had a bad day yet as far as battery goes. So there's definite improvement there as far as just when you take it off the charger and you're just using it for the course of the day. There's not really a time when you're like, oh man, I'm not going to make it to the end of the day. It just, every time you look at it further into the day, you're still 60, 70, 80%. And then something late at night, like, 8 or 9 at night, you're down to 25 or 30%. So far the battery's been great.
Would you attribute that to the optimization of Android Pie at this point? I would imagine the battery's bigger, but
yeah, the 3XL is smaller than the 2XL was. It's only the 3 that got the bigger battery, but I don't know if it's a mixture of software optimization or it's just because it's a brand new battery. It's, whenever I had my Pixel 2 XL, it had great battery life too. So after a year's worth of charging, it started to, not be able to make it through the day. But it was like Google was on a roll for a while there. They would come out with a phone, and as the battery degraded, they would come out with a new tech in their update to help preserve battery life. So it kind of leveled it off. Whereas if you never updated your Pixel and you used it for a year, you'd probably see like a massive battery drain. But it's just, they keep coming out with new software tweaks which allow it to extend the life of the battery, so you don't really notice it's degrading because they just keep adding software features to it. And the same thing if you get a brand new Pixel 2 XL now with all those tweaks, the battery seems to last forever too. So
fair enough. I'd heard across the board from a lot of the reviews I'd seen that people were expecting something extravagant battery life wise, and they were getting a day worth of having 30% left at the end of the day, which I think is, a day and a half of battery life is worthless to me, because considering you're charging your phone halfway through the next day. So unless you're getting 2 days worth of battery life, then just get a day's worth and charge it, because no one's trying to charge their phone halfway through the day in real world types of scenarios. Speaking of charging, I think you had mentioned you got the Pixel stand as well.
Yes.
I know that it adds some functionality with like a docked mode of sorts. And it actually charges at 10 watt wirelessly. Yes. So it fast wirelessly charges compared to, I think it's the only wireless charger that'll fast wireless charge that device currently. So kind of your experience with that as well.
So it sort of turns it into like a Google Home of sorts. If you have your device locked with a passcode or with something, the voice unlock feature has been removed from it during the latest update. So when you went to talk to the phone, it would make you unlock it to do anything, which kind of defeated the purpose if you were sitting there and you wanted it to do something. When you put it on this stand, it sort of unlocks a couple features for you to use, so you can still talk to it and it'll bypass the lock screen with some basic stuff. So it's pretty cool. As far as when you set it there, it's kind of contextual. When you set it down at the bottom of the screen, it tells you, basic things like if it's late at night, it'll say good night. When you hit it, it'll turn off your lights, and it sort of puts up buttons there. And the same thing when you're watching Netflix or something, you get your little remote control appears there, and it's just real dim in the background. So it's just it's sort of like, when you look at it, it's doing whatever it is it thinks it should be doing at the time. So if you're watching Netflix and the lights are on and it's 10:30 at night, you've got your controls to pause and stop and fast forward Netflix, and then right below that is a little button to turn off the lights. So it's pretty neat as far as that little added functionality you don't get with any other wireless charger.
I'm a fan of wireless charging overall. To add one, this is the first experience we've had with a Pixel on wireless charging, but to immediately out of the gate have fast wireless charging be an option, I think is a nice add, at least right out of the gate. I guess the big question at this point is how's the notch been? Everything I've heard is basically you tend to look at your phone towards the middle of the display where most of your content is. So it kind of fades as far as being in your periphery of your vision. So I know you're not going to care, but please tell me what your experience is like.
It doesn't matter. You don't even notice it after a while. It's just,
you didn't turn it off in software.
No, it doesn't I don't want to turn it off in software because it does occupy a pretty wide space at the top. And the problem with turning that off is that your pixels are going to wear unevenly. So whenever, 6 months down the line, you're going to have a permanent bar there no matter what. So if Google decides to do an update where they add some functionality where you bring that back, you have essentially worn out your pixels unevenly as far as the display goes, and you're going to have this off color bar, a thick bar, but like at the top, and it would just drive me nuts because I know that whenever the displays do start to burn in, you get that retention in there. It starts to you start to really notice it, and that would drive me crazy if that were like that, if they didn't wear evenly. So I leave it open just so I can. It's not a pretty phone, but Google never really made. It wasn't about the phone looking good. It was about the function of it, and this is no different. Like this is a very functional phone. It's just not pretty. The back is nice, which is why they show it in all the advertisements. But the rest of the phone is just the whole front of the phone is just plain. It's awkward looking.
It's a solid 5, I would say.
It's the face looking at you. I think that's off-putting. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I feel like if there was a meme about like drinking, it would show that one on one side, and then after you had a drink, the other side would be like Galaxy Note 9 face.
How many beers would it take to take a Pixel 3 home?
It's wildly inappropriate, Mark. All right.
Yeah, that's how I roll at this point.
And yet very hilarious.
Mm-hmm. I had heard some stuff about when we're talking about the back and the scratching. I know you don't use cases. So which color did you get?
Black.
Okay, so that was the one that I had heard had some issues retaining scratches, but also being able to like wipe them off or clean them out or buff them out to a certain degree. So granted you're babying it, but have you seen any of that so far?
Yeah, mine looks brand new across the back. Like you can't even tell it's, I don't even know.
Sit your phone down unless it's on a towel.
Come across the camera at all, but I'll try to hit the light. There's not a mark.
Even Eddie showing us his phone, they won't let you see the notch. It'll only go up back against the back of the screen. That's
awesome. That frosted effect across the back. It's
grippy, I would hope. At least a little bit.
It feels nice. It feels better than both. It's the nicest feeling Google phone that there's ever been. I go all the way back to the Nexus 1, and I think of every Nexus and then every Pixel after that. This one feels the best in the hand. Like the glass is rounded, like the corners are just perfect. Like it feels like a really nice, solid device. Best feeling Google phone in the hand. But the frosted glass stamp, I think it's more for clicks. First of all, very few people put their phone in the same pocket that they have keys and change and other stuff like that. And the true people who really looked at this, they saw that it's the actual thing rubbing off on the glass, not the other way around. Like if you take a key across it, it's the actual key across the glass, like a chalkboard.
The chalk on the board, not the board being scratched.
Not the board being scratched. So you can, with something hard enough, of course, scratch it. But unless you're legitimately, you'd have to want to. Like you'd have to just, people who put their phones in their pockets with change and keys, or people that, throw it down on hard surfaces, like they're not the kind of people who obsess over the look on the back. Like you're just not gonna. I see people all the time where their phones are caked with like mud and all this stuff. They don't care about that aspect. So they're not going to be the person to turn around and say, "Oh, the glass! Oh my gosh, it's got a mark on it," because they treat their phones a certain way, so they expect that. And then the other half of the folks who treat their phones like super careful with them, that would be upset about a scratch, like they're not doing those putting their phone in a position where it's going to get those scratches. So it's not, you might get one accidentally and say, oh no, like that's terrible. But I think that's more of a clickbaity kind of thing, and just to try to gain viewership.
How many people actually see the back of their device after the first week they have it? I mean, you're probably going to have a case of some sort on it. Like I said, Eddie doesn't sit his phone down unless it's on a towel or like a bed of roses. Like
carry a microfiber just for that purpose.
And you think we're kidding?
We're not.
But no, we're not. But I mean, most people aren't seeing the back of their device, whether they care or not, what the back of the phone looks like. So you're not really looking at the back of your phone. You're interacting with the front of your phone. No one really cared. How many iPhone 4s when the iPhone 4 came out and the backs were glass? How many of them were broken or cracked? 2/3 of them, and no one cared. And it just was what it was. So I think Eddie's right. It's more of okay, this is something that is a thing. It's just not at the top of the priority list. He agrees. Thank you. You had, both of you guys had and have the Pixel 2 XL with Android Pie. So is there a difference? I know they now use a gesture-based software in functionality. Is there a difference between that functionality on because is Pi on the 2XL and the 3XL? Is there differences? And is that a usable type of gesture-based sort of thing now? Is it not a hot mess?
There's more polish on the 3XL. The wallpapers, the transitions, there's definitely more polish as far as when you unlock the display, like when you tap the display, wherever you tap, the screen sort of fades in from that spot. So like if you double tap the screen to turn it on, you'll see where your thumb is. That'll kind of like a ripple effect will come out, and that doesn't happen on the 2XL. That may be wallpaper based. Because I've picked the new wallpapers that Google has. I don't know if it'll let me show it or not here, as far as, let's see if I can get it to. So do you see how it sort of fades out? But there's just more polish everywhere. So the core of the operating system is the same. I don't see very many differences as far as the actual, like what it does. It's just the differences are in the presentation, where it just seems like there's a lot more. There's not like a weird stutter or an unnatural transition between things. It's more of a very smooth and deliberate and gradual transition between apps and between doing things. So there's just a greater layer of polish involved. But other than that, it's the same operating system.
Check mark. Polish. Check. The speakers, I mean, we're talking about dual front-facing speakers. I mean, you listen. I don't know how you listen to music necessarily, or other things.
They're loud.
Yeah,
like they're loud enough that you have to turn them down watching something. Like it's been a while since I've heard a phone that was this loud as far as the speaker quality went. So that's definitely a huge plus. Using it on speakerphone or listening to something or playing a video, it's substantially louder than everything else.
And I know we talked a little bit prior to coming on about the microphone and video recording on the device.
That one's meh. That one's definitely meh. So it removes almost all the lows. It's not very bassy. I shot a video in my car where I shoot a bunch of videos. And anytime that there's a software update and there's something very specific where I don't use a real microphone, where I use the phone's microphone, it was always passable on the Pixel 2 XL. And then when I listened to it on the 3 XL, I'm like, oh man, like it sounds like my voice is much higher than it is. And there's literally no low, no bass at all to it. So it just sounds very odd.
So if someone's trying to get this device for video recording and using that microphone, probably not the best option for them out there.
Not until they update it. Now, the Pixel 3 XL does support external audio, meaning that you can get, I'm going to try it with the the Yeti microphone with a USB to USB-C and plug it in and see if I can record my audio that way if I'm shooting live. And we'll see if that works. But the Pixel 3 XL does support external microphones. So that's probably the way to go until they do a software. I'm sure they'll do a software update.
I was going to say, is that fixable in software?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not the microphone. It's definitely the software. And they've said it themselves. The idea was to reduce background noise, wind, like hum. And it definitely does. Like when I first started editing audio, one of my mistakes was when you remove the background noise, you also cut off like some of the low end, and you would have people with higher voices and they sounded fine. And then people with lower voices would kind of sound like echoey or muffled. That's kind of like what that phone is doing now, where when I was driving, you don't hear any wind noise, any type of noise, but it's cutting off that lower part.
Noise reduction on overdrive, basically.
Yeah, it's just too much. I think they need to make it more adaptive, and then that'll fix that issue.
Okay. See, you can be objective, ladies and gentlemen. It happens once in a while. In the camera experience, I know that you take a decent amount of pictures. The Pixel 2 XL and the Pixel 2 were widely lauded as best in class. They added some features to this camera. I think the low light stuff just got put in or just came out, just was released update wise. So your experience with the camera so far?
So you still have to side load the night sight feature. It's not publicly available yet. I would assume that in the November update it will be present, because I'm using the leaked, cracked version of it essentially. And had that feature been part of the phone when it launched, it would have taken the headlines away from everything else. It is by far the most incredible thing that I've ever seen computational photography do. It does things with dark pictures that they're just destroying everything else. Like there's just no one else is even close as far as being able to manufacture a photograph out of some of the garbage that you throw at it as far as darkness goes. So had it been available at launch, it would have destroyed everything. It would have trumped all of the other things. Like you'd still see the scratch stuff, you would still see, but the YouTube and all the internet would have been ablaze with people showing what night sight can do. But as far as the regular camera goes, it's similar to the 2XL, where if you were to have 10 smartphone cameras and you just pulled them out real quick and took a picture, you would get a usable picture on the 3XL more often than you would on any other device. It's just still a solid camera. It's just that night sight differentiator is going to change what people expect out of a camera.
So they basically took that camera from last year's phone and updated it with some extra software features that are going to make it extra functional this time around. But the two things that I thought, not to cut you off there, but the two things I thought were cool were that night sight and the top shot aspect, which I saw in a couple of videos in work and in progress, where it's taking those couple different photos in a few frames, and like people that move, or if it's a dog or things that animal that move while you're taking a photo, it has a few frames to pull that back together and have a passable photo, which I thought was as impressive as anything at this point.
Yeah, that's the top shot is also not present currently. When it was the demo version of it, like the one that you can play around with, it still if you don't take the main shot, if you take one of the other shots, it's still a lower resolution version. But it looks like now what they're doing is they're using their technology for the digital zoom. When you zoom in and it sort of extrapolates the pixels and fills in the data so that you get a cleaner zoom. It looks like they're doing that same thing with the top shot, so that if you do pick one of the lower resolution shots, it's using that same pixel technology to kind of fill in details so that it sort of upreses it, I guess is the best way to explain it, where you're still getting a high quality photo if you don't pick the one where you snapped it. It's been a while since I've seen anything else, so that may change when the final release comes, but we'll find out then.
So in the grand scheme of photos and camera comparisons, do you think this is top of the line as far as, we'll go with Android devices? Is this the camera? If the camera is the most important thing to you on your smartphone, is this the phone to purchase?
Yep. Sure is. Without a doubt. There just is no, I mean,
we hear a lot about the Note 9 and the S9, not necessarily now, but the Note 9.
It's hard to pick a high-end flagship phone that, like from Samsung, for instance, or LG, that doesn't have like a really nice camera. That it's just, what they don't have is the computational stuff on Google's end. So the camera that you buy with a Note is kind of the camera you're going to have for the duration of the time you own that phone. The camera you buy with the Pixel is going to be constantly updated in terms of being able to do new things and perform better under different circumstances as it learns. So as the machine learns, like, what happens, why did these photos turn out like crap? Then all of a sudden an update comes out and then they're not anymore. Like, that's something that you don't get with any other smartphone manufacturer. They just don't have that machine learning computational power behind it. So it's becoming less and less about the camera lens. You just need, a very good lens and then incredible software, and you can't compete, because 6 months from now that camera will continuously improve, whereas your other manufacturers, they're not in the business of doing that, so they're not going to have those new features come down the line in their software itself. And it's been that way forever. They may add like a new mode of some sort, but you're not going to get anything, groundbreaking new like you are with the way the Pixel works.
Makes sense. I hadn't thought about it in that aspect. You hear about it being the XO mark and those ratings, but you can, from what I understand, it's easy to purchase those spots. Like things like that, it is what it is. But for the average person wanting to just pick their phone out of their pocket and take a crazy picture, because I know that within that notch, you're getting a wide angle camera for that super wide selfie, which I think is a big deal for the average person, to be able to take a picture with more people in the frame and just overall more functional for someone just trying to take their phone out of their pocket and take a picture.
I mean, that wide angle selfie lens was my favorite thing about the LG V10 when I had that for a hot second. But, it sounds like what Google did was they took a camera that was already the best on the market, in my opinion, at least, on the 2XL, and made it better. Is that fair to say?
Yep. It's a slightly different, architect. It's designed a slightly different way, very similar sensor, but it's just, they designed it to work with their software as opposed to anything else. So it's almost like the Pixel 2 was like a testing ground for that particular sensor. And then when they realized what they could do on the processing end of things, they just made the improvements that they needed to with the cameras on the 3, so that they can modify their software around the camera, the hardware itself, so that they could constantly improve without having to, get a different camera lens. Now it's all software based.
So Eddie says, stamp it. If you want the best smartphone camera at this point that will grow with you and add more functionality, the older it gets, it looks like the Pixel 3 and the Pixel 3 XL are kind of the way to go. Because you're going to get good cameras on most flagship devices. This one seems to be, based on Eddie's take, going to be able to grow a little bit on the software side of things and the machine learning aspect. So that's always been, since the Pixels have been a thing, probably the toppest, the biggest aspect of why you bought a Pixel besides stock Android was the camera and what it could do. So basically, I mean, for you, it's always a valid upgrade to the next Pixel because it's Eddie. But for someone else, so you have family members, you have people that you see out and about, they're rolling with the Pixel 2 or the Pixel 2 XL. Are you saying, go get this device, this is going to change your experience? Or is this something they can skip until the next version?
I would say at full price, maybe not. But if there's a deal that comes along where there's like a trade-in deal or something where you can get $300, $400, or $500 for your current device to trade in, then absolutely. I would say it's 100% worth it, provided that there's some reimbursement, I get, or some
incentive to do it.
Right. Whether you're trading in your current Pixel 2 for some amount of money, or if there's a promotion going on where you get, you can trade in and you get up to 300 or something. It's just, I would say that would be the perfect scenario. Like if you get a couple $100 off of it, I don't know why you wouldn't, if you really enjoy the 2XL. It's just improvement in every way.
It's a no-brainer from the original Pixels, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't even hesitate.
Okay.
You have to think of it from the perspective, someone like me, I'm on a payment plan with my 2XL. So I'm coming up on that halfway mark. So I paid almost $425 on it. So I'm going to want to get some serious money back on it, without feeling like I'm paying more to upgrade it. So
paying for that.
I feel like that's the notch fee.
But I think that's what's on most people's minds is, okay, I have this device now. Is this worth $4 more a month? Like Brian's saying, if you're in a device payment sort of situation, or I mean, people more and more these days are just buying their phones outright, which is, like you said, if you're getting a couple $100 off, to live with a camera that learns with you and adds more functionality at the older it gets, minus a battery life is kind of a tough scenario the older a phone gets. But so I'm hearing Eddie is saying, if you want a device that has best in class camera, a battery that survives the average day, and has software that's going to keep growing with you camera wise and regular, this is the Android device for you. It is at the top of the echelon with price points, though.
Yes, but it's you get a lot for your money as far as the phone goes. Like, it's definitely a good, solid made device. Like it's more than just the software itself. It's just like the whole package. It's just a really well built, well manufactured phone. It seems to be, it lacks in very few, like nothing's perfect. There's no device out there that's 100% perfect, but for what you're paying, it's a good mix of materials and a good mix of, the software features, of course, but what it's made of and how well it performs, and you're guaranteed 3 years of software updates. Like there's a lot of good with this phone itself. And usually if you're not grabbing one the very first day it comes out, there's always deals and stuff that comes along. And if you're, all you got to do is, if you're kind of worried about the $800 or $900, is just kind of scope out one of those deals and then scoop it up whenever it goes on sale, or you get a couple $100 extra off. That would be the way to do it.
Also, I guess in a different frame of mind, is this the Android phone that can convert the iOS user if they're looking at Android?
I would say, yeah. But I'd say the same thing about the Pixel 2. the transfer is easy, like moving your stuff over is easy. It's just how invested are you in the Apple ecosystem? I mean, if you just have an iPad, no big deal. If you have a Mac, if you have an Apple TV, it starts to get a little fuzzier because if you have a HomePod, like none of that stuff really works with Android. The HomePod just doesn't work at all with Android. Like AirPods barely, they barely work with Android. Apple TV doesn't work with Android. I mean, it just depends on what you have. If you're already invested in the Apple ecosystem, there's nothing you can do to get out short of getting rid of all of the stuff.
Get rid of all the things. Yeah. Which makes sense.
Just take your iPhone and your Apple TV and your MacBook and just throw it in the trash.
Yes. All that money. I think that's the conversation that I have with a lot of family members anymore is, okay, I'm curious about Android. What should I look at? Because my iPhone's boring to me, or I've been on iOS and I'm curious what else is out there. So in that case, if you're openly looking for something, I guess this is the perfect starting point or entry level into Android, especially with a stock version or a Pixel launcher type of thing, Pixel experience.
If you don't have those other things, if you don't have all that other stuff, it's just Apple is the best at that ecosystem stuff where, you know, the HomePod, the Apple TV, it really is as close to flawless as I've ever seen. And Google, I think, has a long way to go before. I mean, even their own Google branded hardware doesn't always match up as far as, like, I use those Titan security keys. So I can't log into a new device unless I have a physical key. And if I was ever confident about no one ever getting into my account, I could barely get in because the keys like kind of worked and then they kind of didn't. And it took me like 5 or 6 tries to get into my phone when I first got it. Same thing with some of my like Pixel Buds, like, you know, AirPods, as soon as you open them up, Apple's like, hey, look, you've got AirPods. Let me help you set this up. Like the Pixel Buds, I'm like shaking them around, trying to get them to pair. It's just not
in the dance.
It's not.
That's now make that the thumbnail because that just happened.
It's not the flawless experience that you get with Apple. Like there's definitely some. So if I gave my non-tech savvy family members an iPhone and AirPods, I would have I'd be able to turn around and walk out the door and not think about them having any difficulty setting them up. If I gave them Pixel Buds and a Pixel, I would have to stay because I would not be totally convinced that they would be able to get them to work. So they're not there yet. But for those who are patient, of course, they work. It's just not as flawless as an experience. So that's when you talk about coming from Apple to Android. If you have those things, and even if you were going to throw them all out and say, you know what, I'm going to start fresh with Android. If you liked and enjoyed or took for granted that experience with connectivity, you might be in for a rude awakening.
You just got to hire Brian to throw all your stuff out the window. Yeah. I get what you're saying, though, because I think the never-ending battle is Android or iOS, and it's just not a black and white type of thing. There's a lot of gray involved, and it's an Apple ecosystem thing. I'm in the middle of being on the other end with iOS, where I see some of the refinement with applications that I didn't necessarily see with the Android versions. I'm not blown away by iOS, but iOS does enough for most people, for that to be a good experience and for them not to want to deviate from it. So I get it. I thought maybe this would be the device that would finally get people to kind of jump a little bit at a higher rate, but I think that's the loyalists are going to stay on their sides regardless, I think. So, I mean, I think that was the majority of it. I mean, overall, for your needs, I mean, we'll give it a 0 to 10. It's not going to be 0, but for your needs, where does it rank? I mean, your Pixel from last year probably did pretty well in your in your mind, where does this rank as far as what you need out of the device?
So for me personally, this would be a 10 out of 10 phone for me. It took every little thing about the 2 that I was kind of, missing or that wasn't quite right again, and it just fixed it all. Like there couldn't be a more boringly perfect phone. Like it's just
no notch.
There's just nothing special about the way it looks, but from a usability standpoint, like I have yet to be disappointed from using it. Like it's just a solid phone that it's quick. It does what I want it to do when I need to do it. I couldn't be happier.
Ringing endorsement from Eddie Daniels, not the clarinet player. So, I mean, that I covered it. I wanted to get Eddie's review. We wanted to get for you guys an idea of who this phone's for, why you should buy it if you're on this device, or this device, an iOS sort of comparison, which is never super easy for anybody to do because there's fanboys on both sides of the fence. But I think that kind of leads into, I think Brian wanted to talk a little bit about the newest iteration of the iPhone that started pre-orders a few days ago, probably a week and a half ago, and kind of get a feel for what we think about it. So go ahead, sir.
So 10R, the probably best named of the of the series of phones, came out officially on Friday. Underwhelmingly, I would say, based on what I've read. Not the usual line out the door, at Apple stores. So quick rundown of its specs, and then we'll get into your guys' thoughts as to what's going on with it. So 6.1 inch display, so slightly larger than the 10S, but of course not as big as the 10S Max, which still pains me to actually pronounce the full name. Same A12 Bionic processor, 3 gigs of RAM instead of 4 in the 10S and 10S Max. The liquid Retina LCD panel. Instead of
it has to be in quotation marks because
there's no other way to do it.
It's a freaking LCD screen. It has to be in quotation marks. It's
rocking 720p, so that's not bad. No 3D touch. So I guess so. What are your initial thoughts on that device?
Oh, let me go.
I'll let Mark go first.
So this device is for a certain demographic. If you want to feel like let me elaborate. If you feel like if at the end of the day you feel like you got a deal on a new iPhone, this is the phone. You're getting $250 off of the entry level flagship, so the 10S. You're $250 less than that. You're getting a display that you're just looking at, you're not going to be able to tell a difference of, regardless of the pixels per inch. The average person is not going to care. They're not going to, besides the fact that the bezels are a little bit thicker on this device, you're not going to see a visible difference from the viewing distance that most people use their phones. So when someone can feel like they got a deal on a newer iPhone and they're getting wireless charging, they're getting the same processor as the 10S and the 10S Max. They're getting most of the camera features, minus the I think it was the telephoto, or they're getting the telephoto. I can't remember at this point, but there's some portrait mode functionality there, and you get wireless charging, and you get a bigger display than the 10S. I think this hits a larger portion of a demographic that can feel like they got a deal on an iPhone, so they're going to go that route. And the overwhelming majority of people think this will be the highest selling iPhone of the 3. So I think it serves its purpose. I think we talk about clickbaity stuff as far as features and overhyping things that are wrong or not up to par. The only thing I don't like is when you're watching YouTube, you can only watch it in 720p. That maybe video consumption may be a little bit of a lesser experience than the other two models, but you're not going to tell a difference on this display. I mean, no one's holding it directly here to tell the difference. I think this is going to be the iPhone for a lot of people. I know a family member that got one recently. Battery life, because this LCD panel is better from what it seems. So, I mean, I think this is going to fit people's lifestyle, especially when they're seeing their bill, and that monthly payment of that device will fit a lot more people than I think we're giving it credit when we're talking about the shortcomings of some of the specs. Rant done.
Eddie, what do you think? I mean, you know, you're losing some features. You're looking at an aluminum body, IP67 instead of 68, the solo camera instead of dual, which, you know, I guess isn't to me not tremendously important, but, you know, what do you think?
I don't know. I think it's a necessary device in Apple's lineup. They no longer have a sub or a less than $1,000 device that's not older. So if you're looking to get the latest, processor, you're looking to get the latest tech, your options are $1,000 and up. So I think it fits nicely with maybe a family where there's multiple children. You've got 3 or 4 people that need to get a phone. Essentially, for those phones you're saving $1,000 as far as if you were to have purchased 4 iPhone XS's. That's another $250 a phone. That's another $1,000 that you spend. They're another $40 or $50 a month on your bill if you do it that way. So imagine you've got 3 or 4 kids of the age that they want iPhones, and what that extra $50 a month less on your bill would do, just because, and it's, for all intents and purposes, it's almost the same device as far as capability goes. The newer chipset was a good call. I don't know that I would have been able to be as excited about it if it didn't have the A12 in it.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that's why I ran it so much, because it still has that internal stuff.
The screen is okay. I mean, they still use top quality panels, so you're not really losing anything. The thickness of the bezel is a little odd holding it next to one of the other ones, but I understand why it's like it is. That bottom bar, they needed to have the display drivers for it, and something similar to like the Moto 360 was, where they had to have a certain thickness black space at the bottom to hold it. And then technically, I mean, the rest of the screen really isn't like that. It's just that for uniformity's sake, they didn't want a thicker bezel on the bottom and then thinner bezels all around. So it's actually not as large as that, but they use pixel masking, which is they black those pixels out on the edges to give it that effect, where if they didn't mask those out, the display would actually be much closer to the edge all the way around it, with the exception of the bottom, which is the only true bezel that's on the device. But because they didn't want it to look lopsided, like the Pixel for that matter, you have the huge tip at the bottom, and then it's like these really tiny bezels at the top, and then a big notch. It's like a weird
appendages going on there.
It's like weird stuff happening all over the screen. It's just, they decided to, mask those pixels out and make it so that the screen had one uniform bar all the way across it. So,
I don't want to interrupt, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about if you hold this phone up against this phone, no one's doing that. You're doing that in the store, but the person that's buying this phone isn't doing that. They're not looking at this phone and saying, I see a difference, or this bezels. I mean, we're doing that because of reasons, because we're here. But I mean, that's not what people are doing to make the decision of what I'm going to spend my money on. Well, some are, I guess, but the percentages are super low compared to the person that's going and saying, I'm saving $250 and getting 9/10 of the same functionality as that phone. and you're getting an extra coral color. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think the average person's doing any of that. Sorry, it's not a personal attack. I'm sorry.
No, I don't.
Eddie looked extremely offended, Mark.
No, I was trying to think of what it's. You notice it when you're doing things landscape-wise. So, like, it becomes most apparent not when you're using the phone in portrait, but when you're using it in landscape view. Like, everything, there's extreme top and bottom bars in order to try to, and it's all software done, but just to try to keep a good balance. So if you watch YouTube on one of those iPhone XRs, you would see like there's a substantial difference in terms of how it looks whenever you're using it. So people that play games, there's just there's concessions made in order to do it. So it just depends on the type of person that you are. Like if you're a 12-year-old, you've got an iPhone, you're not really going to care about stuff like that because you're like, oh man, I've got an iPhone, this is perfect, and it's red or it's blue or it's yellow or it's coral. But if you had like a 10 from last year and you were thinking, well, the 10S Max is too big, maybe I'll go to the 10R. I think that you would see it. I feel like even if you didn't care, you would still care. Like if you didn't think you cared, you'd say, I don't know that I like this.
I thought about it having a 10 now. I'm like, I don't know that. And I agree with you there, but I'm not the average consumer. So me looking at, I don't know that too many people are saying, hey, if you have this iPhone 10, get this 10R, but because you're losing some camera functionality because of the second camera. But I noticed when I look at it, I'm like, okay, I don't buy the next phone to add bezels, if that makes sense. I'm still ranting.
I mean, I think if you look at it, our question is who is this for? So out of the, we've talked about the Pixel 3, Pixel 3 XL, the 10R, the 10S, the 10S Max. The 10R is the cheapest phone out of that bunch, right? At $800.
That's kind of scary to think about.
Right. And you've got a camera that's arguably maybe not the best, but one of the best on the market. You've got the potential for some really banging battery life. You have an operating system that's very user-friendly, that works.
Super optimized.
Right? Optimized for the hardware.
Chipset, yeah.
Running Apple's newest chipset. It's going to be compatible with the Apple Watch, which is the most popular smartwatch in the world. Why wouldn't you buy this phone if you're kind of in that budget mindset? There's no reason not to. If you're not particularly tied in to Google and their services, and even if you are a little bit, most Google apps run just fine on iOS. So
that was me, 100%. I wasn't super tied into Google, and I have some of them not quite as well on iOS, but it's just now I can see when you said that, it just clicked in my mind why it was $749 and not the $699 that we were talking about when we were talking about before it was going to come out, what we thought it should be priced at, because they can get that. They can get $1,000 for the 10 and the 10S. They can get $749 for a 10R because of everything you just said. It just light bulb.
I mean, there's not a good reason to not buy it if you're looking at it from the budget end of things. When you put all those pieces together, you have something that you're probably going to be able to hang on to for 2 or 3 years, and that as long as it doesn't have the issue with 5C with the panel popping off, it'll be fine. And Apple tends to keep their software updated for at least 3 years. So, you're in kind of the same boat as you are with a Pixel. So, I mean, personally, that's my budget pick. If you're not like fully integrated into Google services, And even then, if you are, it's not that big of a deal because all that stuff works on iOS anyway. So
I agree. I mean, when we're saying budget because it's $749, and I think
which
Pixel
is, I would have never said that.
The Pixel 3 is $799, right?
Yeah.
The regular Pixel 3 is $799. So it does, and you're right, it undercut that. It's not a bad looking phone at all. I mean, besides the back not having vertical cameras, it looks exactly the same. Besides having aluminum instead of stainless steel. 3D touch no one uses anyways. It has a haptic touch, like force touch sort of feature that just kind of mimics it. I mean, you lose IP68, so it's like, how far down can you hold? No one, please don't swim with your phones. Like, PSA.
Try to do it. It's not going to work.
He said it all sadly. I mean, at the end of the day, like Ryan said, who is this phone for? I think it meets a ton of criteria for a lot of people. I mean, there's not really, unless you're a high end user where you want the latest and greatest. It is the latest. It might not be the greatest. Why wouldn't you? We're answering the question with the question. Why wouldn't you get this? And especially if you don't mind iOS, and you're not going to buy it if you're an Android fanboy by any means. But unless you want
my older sister, right? She's ready for upgrade. She's using the OG Pixel XL, and she was like, "What should I get?" And I was like, "Do you love your Pixel?" She was like, "Yes." I was like, "Get a Pixel 3." You know, if she had said no, I would say maybe look at the 10R because it's a little bit cheaper. You know, either the Pixel 3 or the 10R. You know, the 10S is a maybe. If screen size is really important to you, that's where I would look at a 10S Max. You know, have the biggest, fanciest phone on them. Yeah, but even then, yeah, you're right. It's not even that far off because it's what, 6.5
versus
6.1, 0.4 inches, and it's probably just bezel.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Pixeled bezel, which I didn't know was the thing, so we learned something when he tiptoed around my question when he didn't really answer it.
Eddie's gonna smack you.
That's what I'm here for. He's just thinking about his Pixel. He's fun. He is his Pixel.
I'm gonna get the mediate. I'm gonna get the referee. I'm excited.
I mean, why not? Why not? It's gonna sell.
That's the thing. I can't think of it. I can't. I'm like almost talking myself into buying one because I can't think of a reason to not tell someone to get it.
And it's not gonna be. It's not gonna be slow. I mean,
like my other sister, right? She has a 10S, and I was like, or no, she has the 10, right? So she's up for, you know, the 12-month renewal, I think, next month. And even she was like, I don't think I'm going to get a 10S. I'm just going to hang on to this one. I was like, okay, it's whatever. I don't care. It's your money, you know? So it's and I think Apple did a poor job selling the 10S and the 10S Max in a lot of ways because they really just focused on that processor, which is great. I mean, the processor is awesome, you know, good for them. And then the camera, which we know is not that great compared to Androids that are on the market.
And some of that camera stuff is subjective as far as what types of
that too. I mean,
like as far as the end result goes.
Yeah.
Because very few people, I say very few, not the majority of people aren't color correcting in their photos after they take them. Like they're taking their camera out. And like Eddie said, if you want your phone to come out of your pocket and take a picture, there's a couple phones that he's willing to say, this is what you should use. He said the Pixel. But I mean, this is one of those cameras too, where I think every camera comparison I've seen is just a matter of a difference in warmth. And colors being
low lighting,
natural. Yeah.
Taking pictures at night. Here's the thing, though. I mean, granted, it's 2018. We've had smartphones for what? Let's call it 11 years, right? Will that be fair? 2007-ish. Give it around there. I still don't expect a smartphone camera to take a really phenomenal picture at night. I'm really excited to see what Night Shot does, based on what Eddie said. Because if if it does everything you say it does, Eddie, that's going to change the game. But my expectations for taking a picture with a smartphone at night to this day are like, I know that I'm not going to get a really good picture. And we see it every 4th of July on Facebook and Instagram with people taking freaking pictures of fireworks, and they don't look good. I'm sorry. Just stop.
I consider myself to be pretty darn tech savvy, and there is a saying out there that says that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
Me knowing everything I do about technology, I believe that there is magic involved. Because I have never seen anything. When you take your first picture with night sight, it is simply going to blow your mind as far as even trying to understand how it happened.
You're rolling that to the 2 and the 2XL, right?
I think that it gets top shot for the 2XL and the 2. I don't believe night sight is one of those features. I think it has something.
Gotta upgrade.
I have not seen anything like it. I can't really grasp how it's doing it. I mean, there could be the least amount of light you can imagine, and there's a shot that looks exactly like you took it in light.
Elves. They're doing it with elves, Eddie.
Oh, I was like, what did he say?
Sorry, I was muting myself because I'm typing something. I want to search and see if it is coming to the 2 or 2XL.
I mean, and we've called this feature like 6 things in this stream. It's like night shot, night vision, night mode, night sight, I believe, is what it's actually called.
It is night sight.
What it's actually called, yeah.
What Eddie says it like we're heathens, but I mean, your words, not mine. Does it come down to an iOS versus Android conversation at the end of the day? I mean, I think it doesn't always. With the, I guess, a 10R or a Pixel 3 and 3XL.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking anyone at this point.
So, I mean, if and I think we've hammered on this, if you're fully invested in one ecosystem over another, you're going to pick whichever one you're more comfortable with using. If you don't really care and you're buying on price, the 10R would probably be my pick.
Oh, it pains him.
Painful to say in a lot of ways, but
I don't know if I can show this properly, but that's like the dark. And that's the.
Oh, is that night sight?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're gonna both mute, and then you can show us what you got.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the dark shot, and then that's the light shot. I mean, how it pulls the reflections, and it wasn't there in the.
And that's all that's in post. That's in post processing.
There's a completely pitch black one that someone else did. I'm gonna grab it in a second, just as you guys go, just to show you, because it's just so impressive.
So I guess there's a certain segment of people out there that I think we've all talked to somebody in our lives when we're like, okay, what's most important to you whenever you're making this decision, whether it be battery life, screen, camera is always one of the top 3, I think, on any smartphone. So I think this is a relevant conversation for what you should get, because iPhones have a top end camera for a lot of people. This camera with this functionality Eddie's talking about is probably next level stuff. So talk, yeah, please.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of reflection here, so it's hard for me to. But there's like zero detail in the old shot, and then you look and see what it has done with the details in the shot itself. It's hard to even fathom as far as how it's happening, especially if you shoot it in a room where there's no light source at all, and yet it's still able to somehow miraculously get details. I'm really curious on, I can't wait for there to be some sort of teardown to see how it's doing this, because it's insanely impressive. You're still muted.
I'm trying to find some of those same samples, I guess, to show at the same time here, just so we can get it up on the screen if it's easier to see.
It's too hard to do on the camera aspect.
It looks like I've read this through 2 different articles, that it is going to arrive on the 3 and the 3XL first, and then will work its way backwards to the 2 and 2XL. But I didn't see anything about the OG Pixel.
Let me see if I can. I'm going to try this. We'll see. Because there's a couple just in Google. Where are we at here?
Well, I have a 10S and
here. No, I'll try the Google one. So
it was like infinity.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so these guys right here, this isn't quite as pronounced, I think, is what you were saying, Eddie. But you can see where it kind of pulls out. It blows out the dynamic range on this a little bit, but it pulls out a lot of the definition of the building, and even a lot of the power lines and things like that. I mean, the tree stuff, I think, is the biggest thing that's impressive to me in this shot, is what it pulls out of the tree. That's kind of crazy to me as far as that goes. I mean, there's not a ton of scenarios in here that I saw. There's just normal Google search type of stuff, but I'm going to stop this now because there's nothing really in here. But
so we're going with what Eddie said, and it's Magic powered by elves.
Yep.
I can handle that.
All right.
It's Magic powered by elves. If you have an iPhone, don't buy it. There you go. But to recap, if we're going to recap this hot mess, I think that Eddie was going to have a high opinion of this device, because I think we figured this Pixel 3 and 3XL were going to fix a lot of the concerns we had with the 2 and the 2XL, especially with the 2 and then 2 to the 3 with the screen to body ratio just looking nicer, wireless charging, some of the camera stuff, the screens. So I think we realized that Eddie was going to have a high endorsement for the Pixel 3 and the 3XL. This is probably the Android phone, unless you want all of the features. I think unless you're going to buy a Note because of the S Pen, this is probably the Android phone to purchase. Because I mean, you're in a similar price point with an S9 and S9 Plus, unless you wait until the S10 comes out and you're looking for the in-display fingerprint scanner and all that fun stuff. This is probably the Android phone to buy. The XR, we've come to an agreement. There's really no reason to not buy it unless you were at an iPhone 10. I mean,
I would say that if you already have a 10, I wouldn't get it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're going.
No.
I don't even know that you're necessarily downgrading because the processor's so much better. But even then, you know, you're not losing a.
I have a 10 and I didn't contemplate it.
Right. So yeah, if you have a 10, I think the way that you're viewing your ownership of the 10 is that you have the premium iPhone on the market, and that the 10R is not a premium iPhone.
I agree with that.
Right. And I think that would be the mentality if you already have a 10. So in other words, Mark, you think of yourself as fancy.
I was just going to say, I'm like, I feel fancy right now. I'm not going to be less fancy.
If you're someone like me who doesn't think of themselves as that fancy, and you don't care about operating system, the 10R looks like a good purchase. You know what I mean? I care about operating system.
Unless
I love my Pixel. Yeah. I would get a Pixel 3 in a heartbeat. I just can't justify the extra money right now.
I was going to say, what's your decision when your 1 year hits? Is there a decision for you? You just sticking with it, probably ending up with a Pixel?
For me,
yeah.
Well, I'm probably going to stick with the 2XL. If the camera, I mean, if the camera features are coming out of the battery on my 2XL is fine right now. I don't like the notch. So I'm going to try to hold out as long as I can of buying a phone with one. I mean, if I were to, because I bought mine in December, so I'll be at a year in December, where it's more affordable to buy out the rest of the payment agreement. I would get a Pixel 3, not the XL. For price, notchlessness, I've already complained about the fact that I have tiny hands. So texting one-handed is a little challenging, which I find myself doing more than I thought I ever would. So
I agree. I appreciate that Eddie being in the position he is with his loyalties lying where they lie, that I think he came about the same sort of a conclusion with us in the 10R experience. Like there's not a big reason not to buy it at this point, unless you're looking for the super premium iPhone.
I kind of feel like that meme of that guy sitting at that table with a sign that says blah, 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 change my mind. The 10R is a good buy. Change my mind. I can't.
Do you have anything to say, Eddie, besides because I mean,
it's from an Apple perspective now, or from like a lower end Android device. I think everything but so if you have the 10 or later, there's no good reason to upgrade to it. If you have like a 7 or below, you're probably the 10, and budget is a concern. The 10R is a pretty good buy if you're looking to stick with Apple. If you're not, you've got Pixel, you've got the 3XL, you've also got the Razer phone, you've also got the OnePlus 6T coming. So like, there's a lot's going to change depending on the price points of some of these other phones coming out. And then the recommendations may change based on if the Pixel maintains that pricing, or the OnePlus 6T comes out at like $400, $500, and then the Pixel drops 100 or 200, might make a big difference.
I think you're right. I mean, it changes depending on the day that we're talking about it, which makes it tough. It's just it's where you're at. I mean, it's where you're at with need and all of that sort of stuff. Which when I was talking about the Pixel being the phone to convert or to convert iOS users to Android, is the 10R a phone that convert lower end Android users of the lower end Android devices to something that they feel is more premium than their lower end Android phone.
100%. If you've got a $200-$300 Android phone, that 10R will seem like the greatest thing in the whole wide world compared to what you're accustomed to. So absolutely.
I think that's probably the one thing we didn't think about.
You'll actually get a software update.
Well, okay, so Brian talked about having the Moto Z Play in the household. I mean, if you're coming from something like that 10R is a similar. It's in the Apple ecosystem of devices. That's a similar range, but I think that the 10R comes in feeling more like an upgrade to like a Z Play, or even some of the, I don't want to say entry level LG phones, but some of the stinking like flagship LG, not the V's, but the G line and stuff like that. So if you have a Z Play, a Motorola Z Play, or not an S10, Galaxy S10 or S9 or Note, if you have one of those other devices, I think this phone's gonna feel at least like an upgrade.
Or even if you have, say you bought a Galaxy S7, right, when it came out, and you still have it, and you have a not so great experience with it, 10R isn't a difficult leap to make. You're getting a bigger phone that's probably going to work better. Imagine if you bought a Galaxy S6, or heaven forbid you bought an LG G4, right?
I'm shaking my head like, don't say it. I thought he was going to say S5.
No, the G4, right? Yeah, exactly. you know, and you've had if you've had bad experience with Android phones in the past, you know, and you're like, this is it, done, you know, do I go Pixel? Do I go iPhone? You know, if you don't care that much about the OS, someone's probably going to talk you into an iPhone, because you're going to bump into someone on the street and be like, hey man, what kind of phone do you have? And they're going to pull out an iPhone 4S and be like, oh yeah, I've had this thing for 18 years and it still works.
If I was talking to somebody and they were having issues, and if I was selling a phone and I didn't want it returned, and they had a crappy experience with an S7 that they bought that wasn't new when they bought it, or they had an S8 and it had issues, or an LG or whatever, a Motorola, I would be super comfortable saying, get this 10R. It's gonna give you a good experience, and I would feel like it wouldn't get returned and they would enjoy it. They may not upgrade to another iPhone the next time around, which they probably will, but they might not get an iPhone the next time because of their preference of software and operating system. But I wouldn't feel like it's going to get returned based on the fact that it didn't work the way they wanted it to or the way they needed it to.
Unless there's a flaw in it.
Right. I mean, there's flaws in everything. I've seen reviews on the Pixel 3 XL where there's pixels, dead pixels down the middle of the screen, but that's with anything. I mean,
yeah, every phone has that.
I mean, you'll run into
part
that
of the failure rate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends where you're at. So you ask yourself a question of what's most important, and then you do a pros and cons sort of thing. We try to get all that stuff out there in a video like this so that, one, I can vent, but two, you guys can kind of figure out what makes the most sense for you in your day-to-day life, what's most important. I appreciate the fact that Eddie's had experience with this, with the Pixel 3 XL, so we can get a real world type of viewpoint on how it's working out in the wild, so that at least, I mean, he's a little bit biased, but I mean, I think he would, if something wasn't right on that phone, he would 100% have told us. I think he was more than contrite about some of the things that weren't maybe as good as they probably could have been. But I think each device fits a subset of person of need. It's just a matter of ecosystem at this point. And
color.
Yeah.
You like pretty colors.
I mean,
I've not pink out there. Coral, red, blue, yellow,
white.
Just white. Right? Much white.
Much white. Oh.
Very nice.
So yellow. Much red.
Can someone please pay Eddie for naming rights for these things? They would be so nice. So hopefully that was helpful, both ends of it. I know we got into a rant and it's mostly my fault, but hopefully some of the things we talked over with some of the features of the Pixels make sense for you guys as far as when you're thinking about what's important for you and what you'll want in your next device. And if you were concerned or curious about what even this 10R was and what it would provide you as far as features go compared to the other devices, Android and iOS likewise, I think we answered a good bit of what you're getting out of it and who it serves, which is pretty much everybody at this point as far as we've figured out. If there's anything else that anybody wants to know about these things, I mean, there's comments down there to throw those questions in. We're down there. Brian's down there. He'll answer whatever. Pass that off. But also, I mean, I always like to, towards the end of these guys, kind of give Eddie a spot too, because Eddie does his own sort of reviews on things like this on his channel, but also does some stuff with his Tesla and some other things. So just kind of give
Eddie's Tesla minute.
Yes. If he has something to talk about, maybe plug himself a little bit as far as what he's working on right now and what you may be seeing on his channel.
All right. Well, the Drive on Nav update for all of the Tesla fleet is releasing tonight, which is the first step in automatically changing lanes, taking exits. That first step toward, full self-driving sort of thing, where it's capable of automatically getting into the correct lanes and taking its own exits and merging onto the on-ramps, things like that. So that update comes out this evening. So I'll be looking forward to testing that out on the roadways in the next couple days.
Driving to work in the morning.
Driving to work in the morning. And trying to think what else has really changed in the Tesla world. I don't really think anything other than it's just sort of all software now, where there's just trying to update to make it more to make it do more things.
Are they as far as your channel goes, are you sticking lately with the Tesla software updates, or are you looking at any hardware that you want to look at going forward and making videos on?
There's like a million videos on like phones themselves. So I'm looking at doing some other things as far as, from when I say hardware, like accessory based hardware. Either like not exactly mainstream stuff. I've got a Surface Studio 2 coming. Some things like that I'll want to, put through its paces and use it in a variety of different ways. There's a lot of stuff out there on like video editing, but there's not a lot out there on like 3D content creation, things like that. And those seem to be the most popular videos for folks who can't get those questions answered anywhere else. Like you can go to 5,000 channels and get a Premiere versus Final Cut kind of thing. But when you get into Maya and Lightwave and Blender, you don't really see a lot of, there's a lot of 3D professionals that are looking for something to do their work on, and they don't want to necessarily drop $4,000 or $5,000 on a machine to see that it can't do it. So that's the kind of stuff that, going forward, I'll focus on. I've come into contact with a couple really, really old things from my childhood, like old video game based board games, things like that. So I've kicked around starting a little retro series on some of the pretty cool ways that video games were translated into physical, actual board games themselves. So a lot of fun stuff.
There you go. And me and Brian are just here waiting on Eddie every 2 weeks. So that's what we do.
Bam.
So hopefully, from these guys too, hopefully this video helped you guys kind of get an idea of, if you're in the Android space or the iOS space, or converting one way or the other, which of these devices makes the most sense for you based on some of the things that they do well and some of the experiences that Eddie's had with his. So other than that, I think that this week's went fairly well. We got a lot of stuff out there for you guys. Like I said before, please, if you have questions or things you'd like us to cover later on, because Eddie's got his hands in a lot of stuff, there's comments down there to kind of let us know what we should be looking at for the next episode. But other than that, I think we're pretty good. Eddie, if you would, please say goodbye.
See you later, everybody.
Brian.
Goodbye, Mark.
Very nice. We appreciate it, guys, as always, and have a great night.